Well, good morning to everyone. I know you've been greeted several times, but I just want to greet you again. Just say welcome to First United Methodist Church of Brownwood. This is our Common Ground service, and my name is Scotty Crawford. I'm the associate pastor here at FUMC, and just want to say thank you for being here with us this morning and taking some time out of your busy schedule to be here and worship, and we hope that it's been a great time for you so far, and hopefully I won't disappoint either. So anyway, I always have to follow a hard act on our worship team and Micah and those guys that do such a great job. So anyway, we're in the last part of this series called Pursue. And we've been talking about things that we pursue in life. And in this series, we've been talking about something specifically we need to pursue because we tend to pursue happiness, but we found that sometimes we pursue happiness or things that we think will make us happy so hard that it actually prevents us from being happy. So in this series, we kind of established in the first part that there's another way to be happy, and that's this: that pursuing peace. And we don't really think about doing that, do we? Very much. We don't think about peace being the thing that we pursue, but pursuing peace is actually the pathway to happiness. And we talked about some specific areas of peace in our life. And number one, the second part of the series, we talked about peace with God. We talked about peace with God first, okay? And we said that peace with God was possible because Jesus paid the penalty for our sins. So it's through Jesus and his sacrifice for us that in spite of our sin, we can still have peace with God. And then secondly, we talked about peace with others. And we talked about that a little bit. And I talked to you last week about my failures in that area and that it's a real struggle for me sometimes to really pursue peace with others. And whatever is possible for me to do to have peace with everybody, I should do it. Now, this morning, we're going to talk about peace of mind. And so with peace of mind, I think this one's really important in our day and age because it's just so hard to be at peace in the sense of to still our mind and to still our hearts. But it really is possible. But here's some challenges that we have when we're trying to have peace of mind. See, number one, we have in our life, we have things to be done. The honey-do list and everybody's to-do list that we have. We work hard at work, or if you work hard at home, but if we work outside the home, we come home, we've put in a full day, some of us more than a full day, we get home, and there are things to be done at home. As soon as you walk in the door, it's like spouse gives you her or his to-do list and say, okay, you're not done, don't give up yet, you still got things to do. We've got things to do. We've got dishes to wash. We've got laundry to do. We've got kids to help with homework. And then you know how it is. We've got kids. If you've got kids, you've got kids. You got to haul them to baseball practice and baseball games and soccer practice and soccer games. And then you got music lessons and recitals or dance lessons and dance recitals. And we've got all these things to do. And so, that's enough to stress you out. But then after things to do, we've got pressure to perform. And you know what I'm talking about here. Everybody has pressure on someone to perform those things to do to a certain level and a certain outcome. And, your job, your boss has put pressure on you to be more productive. And your spouse puts pressure on you to always be there, to be present and attentive when all you want to do is just go home and crash and chill out and zone out. That's like me. I'm like the best zoner outer you've ever met in your life. But there's pressure from your parents, if you're a teenager, to perform, or a college student even. There's pressure on your parents to perform in the classroom or on the athletic field and all that. And for us parents, there's even pressures on us from our kids, right? Our young kids, they fight for our attention. So pressure to have their undivided attention. Our teenagers, the pressure is to leave us alone and don't give us any attention. So there's pressures all over the place. And so that's enough. The things that we have to do, the things that we have to accomplish on a day-to-day basis, plus the pressure to perform, that's enough to beat you down, isn't it? But that's not all there is. After that, after pressure to perform, there's circumstances to be dealt with. Just when all the stuff to do and the pressure has knocked you down and just about knocked you out, you think there's nothing else that can be worse. You think things can't get any worse, and sure enough, life happens. Stuff happens. Bad stuff happens. There's tragedy, calamity, all kinds of stuff. Just when we're down at the worst time possible, the worst things seem to happen. I mean, you show up one day, you're already exhausted, worn out, and stressed out, and you get home and your house is flooded. A leaking toilet, or an overflowing toilet, or a broken pipe, or overflowing dishwasher or washing machine. I mean, some of us has had that exact experience, but most of us has had something like that. And so just when you think it can't get any worse, sure enough, it does. And so here's where you get to. I mean, you're already stressed out, aren't you? Just me talking about it. I can feel your blood pressure and your heart rate rising already, just thinking about it. And so you may say something like this, well, excuse me, peace of mind seems impossible because life is so exasperating. Does that sound familiar? Peace of mind, it seems impossible because life is so exasperating. Things just come at us and come at us and come at us and come at us. And just when we think we're almost there, or almost to the end of our rope, something else piles on. And it just seems like this talk of peace of mind, man, it just must be impossible. But that's why we're talking about it today. Because what if you could have peace of mind no matter what's happening? Now, I know how that hits you. I know how that sounds. Excuse me. I'm going to do it again. What if you could have peace of mind no matter what's happening, and what's happening in your life and happening around you and happening in the lives of the people you love and care about? What if, even if you couldn't attain perfect peace of mind, what if you could at least attain some measure of peace of mind? So we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to look at a book of the Bible called Philippians. And the book of Philippians is written by the Apostle Paul. And it's an interesting book because it's like most of his letters. It's a letter. It's a letter that's written to a specific church. And he wrote it to the church at Philippi, hence the title Philippians. And the Philippian church was a really special church to the Apostle Paul. There was something about the diversity and the things that happened there with the Philippians that Paul just absolutely loved these people. And you can kind of sense that if you read the whole book of Philippians, you get that sense. And it's only 4 chapters. It's not long. But you can read it and get the sense of how much Paul loved these people. And so he's writing this letter to them. And it's really, really interesting because here's what I've deemed the kind of the overarching themes that are within the book of Philippians. He talks about joy, happiness, peace, which is our topic, and contentment. It's a real upbeat kind of thing. Joy, happiness, peace, and contentment. Joy, happiness, peace, and contentment. Kind of like lions, tigers, and bears, and whatever. Joy, happiness, peace, and contentment. I mean, when you read it, you're like, man, okay, I want to read that book. That sounds like a good book to read. But it's really interesting because you may not know the history or the circumstances surrounding Paul when he wrote this letter. It's really fascinating because he writes about joy, happiness, peace, and contentment while he's in prison. Maybe some of you knew that, but maybe some of you didn't. And what would possess a man to write about joy, happiness, peace, and contentment while he's incarcerated, while he's in chains, while he's locked up in prison? And so it makes you go, wow, there's something to this that the Apostle Paul has discovered or found, or a place he's come to in his life to be a different kind of place, because he's talking about these upbeat topics, excuse me, while he's in prison. So keep that in mind as we read through this passage. Keep reminding yourself, this dude is in prison, and this is how he writes. So let's start here with Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 6. Excuse me. He says, do not worry about anything. Okay. It's like, pause there. Dude, you're in prison, and you're telling us, do not worry about anything. But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Now, this verse seems incredibly clear, but the wording And the translation of it doesn't really convey the whole idea, I don't think, very well. It's just like me to like tell the Bible scholars that they didn't do a good job of translating. But I'd like to put this in a little different wording for you because it seems redundant in everything, in prayer and supplication and request. That all sounds like it would be prayer, prayer, prayer in the way that we translate for ourselves the meaning of this word. So I'm going to put it in my own words and add my own words to it, okay? I'm not trying to be sacrilegious. All right, so here we go. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by worship. See, that original word there didn't mean prayer in the sense of what we think of when we pray, but that word could be translated. And there could be many translations in the language, but it's worship. What do you think of in worship? In worship, we're submitting ourselves to God. We're glorifying God. We're submitting to His lordship. So when you worry, worship and petition. Petition, you're submitting something to God. God, I want to see this change. I want to see this different thing happen. I'm petitioning you for something. With thanksgiving, that's about our attitude. He says, let your questions be made known to God. So let your questions be made known to God. The things that, excuse me, you just don't understand and you're not sure about. He's saying, if you're starting to worry and be anxious about these things, okay, stop and worship, petition, and submit to God the questions that you have. So in other words, here's what Paul is trying to tell us. Stop worrying and start praying. I'll take a drink on that note. Stop worrying, start praying. Now again, remember, if you read this letter from Paul and you read the whole thing, he's not, stop worrying. You don't worry. That's sin. No, he's saying, look, stop worrying. When you catch yourself worrying, stop worrying and start worshiping. Start worshiping. Start submitting your petitions to God and ask Him your questions. Let your heart be known, because our anxiety and our worry about so many things that combats peace of mind. If we just submit it to God, it may not get everything done as perfectly or exactly like you would want it, but you begin to take it from yourself and put it on God. Cast all your cares on Him because He cares for you. You're submitting your worries and your anxieties up to God when you worship, when you submit those things to Him. He's saying, stop worrying and start praying. And look at the result. He says, and the peace of God, help me out here. I need a clicker or a buzzer. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The peace of God. When you do that, when you stop worrying and you start praying and putting them on God, he says, the peace of God, which surpasses your understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ. You see, in this surpassing understanding, it doesn't mean just that God's peace is so awesome you can't understand it, and that's kind of true. He's actually saying, here's where it hits me. This is where Scotty gets convicted. This surpasses our understanding. The peace of God and putting things on God is better than us trying to figure it out all the time. Because that's where our mind goes, that's where our heart goes, is we start trying to figure things out. And we obsess about them. Whatever's going on, we start thinking about it. And how can I figure this out? And it's not just trying to figure out a solution to a problem. We try to control the outcome. We try to worry to the point where we actually create a certain outcome. And it's silly because we know we can't control circumstances. We can't control the outcome. Now, sometimes we play a part in it, but we can't control what happens. So we worry about it. We obsess over it. And we think just by worrying about it, we're actually going to change what happens in the future. And we know that it can't be possible. And then he moves on. And it sounds like he's going to end it right here, but he doesn't. He says, and finally, beloved, see, serious tone, beloved. He loves these people. Finally, beloved, and now look at this. This is interesting. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is anything, any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Now, Paul's not saying, just go to your happy place. And just put your mind in fairy tale land, you know, with dancing unicorns and flowers, you know, whatever. That wouldn't be like a good place for me. I would kind of freak out. But whatever he's not saying just go daydream in your mind and just think about something beautiful, think about something wonderful. He's saying think about what is. And you've heard this before. He's saying, look, guys, think positive. Whatever is true, whatever is pure, whatever is just, whatever is honorable, saying there's something out there positive that you can find to focus on. There's something positive that you can think about. So think positive. And then this next verse is why I used a different translation today. I used the NRSV. He says this, keep on doing. In other words, you've probably been doing at some point, but keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. And he kind of flips the words here. He says, oh, and by the way, and the God of peace will be with you. You know, that's back to the think positive. He says, if you can't come up with anything positive to think about, just remember, the God of peace, he'll be with you. At least you know that. And so here's what I think he's trying to say to them if I summarize this verse. He says, do what you know to do. Because see, all this about, stop worrying and start praying and casting your cares on God and submitting everything to God and letting God take over and letting God be the Lord of your life. He's not saying just sit on your haunches and do nothing. He's saying instead of sitting and being anxious and fretting and worrying, which I'm telling you is what I tend to do, he's saying, do something. Usually there's something we know to do. He said, do something. Here's an example. I had one of those sleepless nights. It was up at about 3:30 this morning, so finally at like 5 o'clock I get up to study my sermon. And I was fretting and worrying about, because I've been kind of in charge of confirmation this year, and we're almost done. It's our last Sunday. And I was sitting there worrying about the fact that parents don't know that I need them to bring a photo for their kids. And I've been fretting and worrying about this one thing, and you're like, duh. So you know what I did? Well, before it was, not when it was too early, but at about 8:05, I sent a message out to all the parents that said, hey, need you to do this, blah, blah. It's like, that's so simple. But how easy is it for us to sit in our chair, like I sit in my chair every morning, and just stew and fret and worry and be anxious. Paul's saying, look, do what you know to do. Whatever it is that you already know that you need to do, just do it. Do it. The way you eliminate anxiety sometimes is to get moving and doing what you know to do. Because if you're actively doing it, you're not sitting passively and worrying about it. Okay, moving right along. Next verse, he says, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned for me, but had no opportunity to show it. Not that I am referring to being in need. He's saying, I'm not a needy person. For I have learned. Okay, we're getting to the really important part here for Paul. For I have learned to be content with whatever I have. He's saying, I've been in need. I've gone with and I've gone without, but I'm not a needy person. I'm so glad, I'm so thrilled, I'm so overjoyed that you have sent this gift. I don't know what the gift was. It may have been a monetary gift or something, but they had sent some kind of gift to Paul. And he's saying, I'm so glad. I appreciate it. I'm not saying that I've been in need, because really I don't see it there. He said, I've learned to be content with whatever I have. He's saying this is an attitude check. He's saying, be grateful. Be grateful. Now, you may not connect gratefulness with anxiety and with worry and with lack of peace of mind, but if your attitude is grateful, then your attitude is going to be positive, because you're going to be looking at things to be thankful and grateful for. It's going to help you focus on the good things. So he says, be grateful. And then he kind of expounds on this. He says, I know. Now, this isn't a head knowledge. He's saying, I am like intimately familiar with these things. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances. Now look at this. I love that he uses this word. I have learned the secret of being well-fed and of going hungry and of having plenty and of being in need. I have learned the secret. Now, it's not a secret because God doesn't want to show it to you. It's a secret because it's just kind of concealed and we don't quite get it. We don't quite see this. But Paul's telling them, look, I've learned the secret to being well-fed, of going hungry, so he's contrasting, and of having plenty and of being in need. No matter what the circumstances are, Paul says, I've learned the secret of contentment. I've cracked the code of contentment. And we're about to read the last verse, and so don't show it yet, because we're all super familiar with this verse. You've had it on a t-shirt, you've had it on a bumper sticker, or you've used it in a pep rally, trying to pump your athletes up or something like that, or just to cheer your kids up. Look, you can do this. You can do this. Come on, you can do anything if you put your mind to it. And that's not bad, but that's really not the context of this verse. So remember, Paul's in prison, and he's talking about how to have peace of mind no matter what happens. And that's when he gives us this very familiar verse, Philippians 4:13. You could quote it. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I almost wish they just used different language. Here I am criticizing the scholars again. Not I can do all things, but I can deal with anything. I can deal with anything through him who strengthens me. So we put all this together, the context of what Paul is saying about no matter what the circumstances, no matter what's happening to you, no matter how much stuff you've got to get done, no matter how much pressure you have on you from people who want you to perform a certain way, he's saying you can have peace of mind. You can have peace of mind. And peace of mind comes by knowing the God of peace is with you. And I know this is simple, but don't overlook it. And it sounds cliche, but it's not. It's so important. He says peace of mind comes by knowing the God of peace is with you. If your peace is dependent upon circumstances being positive, you know by life experience you're not going to have peace. So Paul's saying to the Philippians, saying, look, I've cracked the code. And if you read the story of Paul in the book of Acts, from starting about Acts chapter 9 and read through the end of the book, you'll see some incredible, epic stories about the life of the Apostle Paul and the dangers and the things that he went through in order to take the gospel to the whole known world in his day. He went through incredible things. I mean, I don't know how many times he was stoned. He wasn't smoking anything. He was stoned. That's not how he dealt with his problems, okay? So don't go there. No, he was stoned and beaten and people tried to kill him so many times, and he was in prison I don't know how many times. He was shipwrecked out in the open sea at least a couple of times. I mean, the guy, you read his life story and you go, this is something you would make a movie about. Maybe I should do that. Maybe write a movie and sell the rights. But it's incredible that this is the same guy who writes Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Who strengthens me, the one who strengthens me. It's about who's with us. It's about who's with you. It's about who God is. It's about who Jesus is and what Jesus has done for you and provided for you and handed you and said, you can have peace. I'm the Prince of Peace. God's the God of peace. That means that's the reason they're named that is because it's a part of their character. When they come into your life, they bring their peace with them. It's about who's with you, not about your circumstances. And see, here's the thing about circumstances, because we try to control circumstances, and we let our happiness and our peace and our fulfillment and our joy be determined by circumstances. But circumstances, the reason they're called circumstances, they're circumstantial. They always change, right? Circumstances constantly change, but God is constant. He will never change. So if your happiness and your joy and your peace is all grounded in who He is and who God is, He will never change. You can bank on Him and His character and what He's like. Not only will He not change, He cannot change. If you're already perfect, you can't get any better. He will never. And if you're perfect, you can't get any worse. It's perfect. He will never change. So I'm going to review here in just a second, but think about this. Peace of mind. And you know by life experience and the people you're with and the life that you live, you know that this peace of mind thing, you just don't see it. You just don't see it. And I'm not talking about those who are non-Christians only. It's we Christians, we do the same thing. We forget who God is. We forget who God is in our lives. And sometimes I think we stop letting God be God in our lives. And we try to take on His role. And we try to control the circumstances. And we try to control other people. And we try to control outcomes. And that causes us to worry and to fret and to be anxious about many, many, many things. And Paul's saying, look, it doesn't have to be that way. Here I am in prison. And I can tell you that even while I'm in prison, I have peace. I have peace in my heart. I have peace in my mind because I know the God of peace is with me. So when you find yourself, this week even, when you find yourself being anxious, when you find yourself beginning to worry and to fret about things, I'm just going to wrap up 4 things here that we talked about today. Number 1, stop worrying. Stop worrying and start praying. I had to tell myself that this morning. I'm telling you, I had to say, stop worrying, Scotty, and start praying. I had another situation I was anxious about. I got an email that really kind of ticked me off yesterday, and this morning I was fretting about it again. I'm like, okay, stop worrying, Scotty. Stop worrying, stop worrying, stop worrying. Start praying. Start giving it to God. And then second, think positive. Whatever is positive. Don't dream some fairy tale up. Find something positive and think on that. And then number 3, do what you know to do. There's some things you already know. God's already instructed, even biblically speaking. There's some principles in your life that you know. You know God has taught you about those things, and you know you should be doing them, and not doing them is causing anxiety and worry and even causing some of the bad circumstances. But God's saying, look, just do what you know to do, at least. Number 4, attitude is everything. Be grateful. I promise you, if you find yourself worrying, if you'll start thanking God, or even thanking someone in your life for things that they are and they do for you, if you start focusing on the positive, you start giving thanks, being grateful, it'll change your mindset almost immediately. Okay, and then this last phrase, I just want to leave you this word of encouragement. You can do it. You can do it. Peace of mind is possible. I'm telling you. It's not easy. And it's constant work, and you don't get there and stop and suddenly you're always there. It's a daily thing. It's a daily walk. It's constantly reminding yourself to stop worrying. Start praying. Start depending on God and stop depending on your ability to control outcomes. Peace of mind comes by knowing that the God of peace is with you. Now, if you're here this morning and you're not a believer, you wouldn't call yourself a Christian, then I just want to point this out to you that this really is your first step towards peace in your life. Peace is a supernatural thing. It's something you can't just figure out and obtain on your own. peace comes from the God of peace. And this God of peace sent the Prince of Peace into the world to pay an incredible price for you. Go back and listen to part 2 of this series. Jesus, that's what he provided, was peace with God. And through him and through knowing him in a relationship to the God of peace through Jesus, the Prince of Peace, by putting your faith and your trust in him and what he did for you, is the first step for you to find peace in your life. And so I just want to invite you to give that some consideration. If you've been maybe holding out on God and you're not quite there, not quite ready, I'm just saying that if you're living with anxiety and trouble and worry, this is your first step towards peace. Let me pray for you. God, thank you for these words of encouragement through the Apostle Paul. Lord, and we know that his life is an incredible witness and testimony to how amazing you are and how amazing it is that you are there no matter what, and that you can bring peace into our hearts and our minds and to our lives no matter what is going on. So God, I just pray for everyone right here in this room that even now you begin to remind them who you are and that you love them and that you've provided a way for them to have peace in the midst of whatever it is that's going on in their lives right now. Thank you that you made the way through Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen.